Hello, this is the WIDA 101 shortened version, and we welcome you to our webinar today. We're going to start off with a video about Moises, and I want you to think about Moises and just what strikes you about being an English learner in today's classroom. And this is a shortened version. If you like a longer version, the long version provides a good lens into the background, the family component, and really what the teacher does as well. But this is a shortened version. I want you to think about what Moises might be feeling as an English learner in the classroom right now.
We have testing all week this week and next week. The tests are going to be hard, but that's all right because we're going to try really hard. Isn't that right, Cameron?
Yes, Ms. Peters.
Okay, great. Everyone listen up. So we're going to want to work all week ours from the answer and the information in the story, okay? We're going to go ahead and test, factual test, and try this actus test. Oh, test, your open up. So we're going to page, you go to B. First on page 3.
¿Qué dijo? ¿A poco va a empezar el examen? No, es una práctica.
We're going to take notes from the story and we're going to turn it into a math problem and we're going to walk through it together, okay? So the boy ran 3 blocks. So everyone write 3 blocks.
I didn't even know. He looked like a stranger.
How long did it take him to run 3 blocks? Michelle?
6 minutes.
Very good, 6 minutes. All right, so then we take 3 blocks and 6 minutes,
¿Por qué el niño
right?
corre con los bloques? ¿Qué? Sí, ¿por qué el niño corre con los bloques? No,
Okay, so the
corre 3
question's going to
calles.
go on to ask us, how long will it take him to run 20 blocks? What do we do? How many minutes is that per block?
8 minutes.
Try and remember to raise your hand if you want to answer, okay? No, it's not 8 minutes. Michelle?
18 minutes?
Nope, not 18 minutes. Yes, Enrique?
40?
40, yeah, very good. How'd you get 40?
I don't know.
You don't know? Well, 40 is the right answer. How did you get it?
I forgot.
You forgot. Okay. Does anyone know how we get 40? Yes, Moises. Yep, that's right. Very good. Great. Can you tell us how you got that?
40?
Yep, very good. But can you explain to the class what you did here, how you got that?
40?
Okay, all right, you guys, settle down.
That is so dumb.
Joe, do you want to lose your recess?
No.
Okay, then. Thank you, Moises.
Can you help me, please?
Can you take a walk with me? I don't want you to worry about the test, okay, Moises?
Sí, estoy preocupado sobre el examen. La directora Rosa dijo que todavía tenemos que hacer.
Just try your best, okay? Do you understand? Not importante.
Sí, sí es importante.
You're right, Moises. It is important.
Okay, and what is it that you really noticed about Moises? Was it how the words kind of jumbled around on the page as he was trying to make sense of the problem? Was it about, you noticed that he went back to what the teacher had taught him instructionally with the boy, and the boy he runs, ran, okay, has run. That meant peace. Did you notice with everybody when he tried to stop and answer? First of all, again, he was able to do things. making sense of the problem. He was even making sense of, knew the answer, but outputting and saying that in front of everybody and being able to communicate his thoughts is very difficult. And of course, having everybody stand and look at you makes it even more difficult. So what would you do? How would you help him if he was in your class? So this is really what this video is about. It's really like, how do we make our grade level content comprehensible for our ELs? What are some instructional supports we can give them? And really, this piece is a lot about the language. So what language does he need to be successful in your math classroom or social studies classroom, your language arts classroom, or if you're an elementary teacher teaching multiple subjects, during those different topic and subject areas, what is it that those students need to be able to be successful with these very difficult standards, as well as have the language they need? And then these last two ones, what can he do and how can he show his learning? We'll touch on those two things, but those are two things that are really included in the longer WIDA video, so I invite you to check that one out if you want to learn a little bit more about using the can-do statements in the WIDA resources, especially for planning and assessment. So the WIDA language development standards are really the bridge for our students between the academic standards and our students. So it allows our students to be able to access those Indiana standards and be able to perform at a high quality level and learn the same content as their students, but also have language developed for them at the same time. So when we think about WIDA and the Indiana academic standards, it's a supporting shift really towards having kids understand complex text. They have a high level of academic language that's required now. There's a lot of language within math for our students. So our students are really required to do a lot of things at a high level that they haven't been required of in the past. When we think about language in itself, we start out with words and phrases, which is where our English learners start. They are often starting with just identifying terms. I always say it's like if we get off the plane in the middle of Spain or France and we have no idea about how to speak French or Spanish, the first thing we're doing is we're just starting with little words that we're asking people: bathroom, food, and we're looking for pictures or terms that might connect us in some way to help us make sense of the language around us. And as we grow, we then move into the sentence level. We start to, our words grow into sentences. And then, of course, we finally are able to have good quality conversations and ultimately be able to write in paragraph form so that it's comprehensible. For teachers, we can really focus on academic vocabulary. This is a huge piece of how we support our English learners in the classroom. In addition to being aware of things like idioms, multiple meaning words, cognates, things like that will all be helpful for your students. With WIDA, there's two terms that they use in regards to language. The first one is language development, and this is really the standards. This is learning that language within your classroom, learning the language of math, the language of science, and we'll talk more about that. And the second one is really around the students themselves. And this is about the language proficiency level of your EL student in your classroom. And so there's levels 1 through 6. Our students test out here in Indiana at level 5, but they continue to be monitored. WIDA goes up to level 6. Level 1 really is that student that comes in with no language at all. Behind them, for our language level 1 and 2, even our 3 students, there's often a long period of silence where they're really just taking in. There's a ton of learning that goes on during that time, but they're really just absorbing the language around them and trying to make sense of everything around them at that point. So the silent time will last quite a while for our early level English learners. Each winter, in January, February, our English learners take a test called Access, and those scores come back at the end of April that will show where your students are. And now, with our school grades and accountability, not only do our students need to make progress on our I-STEP assessments or the new I-Learn assessments or the ECAs, our students also need to make progress on Access and show that they are indeed developing their language, continuously progressing in that area as well. And this just to give you some ideas and some suggestions and really descriptors, characteristics of English learners at each of these different levels. The different levels for the English learners can be found on the WIDA website. You might ask your EL teacher within the building. They can probably provide that information for you as well in a handout. So with Access, there's also 4 different language domains that the students are tested within. So when you get a score back from Access, you can get the overall language proficiency score and what level that they're at, but it'll also break it down into listening, speaking, reading, and writing, and give you a score within each of these areas. Very much like our how language progresses for all native speakers and all individuals, people. The listening piece and the reading piece comes fastest. So we can listen and comprehend better than we can speak it back out. We can read and start to comprehend better than we can write. So the writing and the speaking come later, and their listening and reading come first. As a classroom teacher, one of the things that's very, very important for our English learners is that we are giving them lots and lots and lots of opportunities to speak in the classroom. So often as teachers, we do a lot of that speaking in the classroom, but for our English learners, I would also say for our special needs and our low literacy and our struggling students, and honestly for all students, having opportunities to engage in rich discussions about the text and comprehending the text, having good academic discussions where they're using a lot of academic terms, just lots and lots of opportunities to speak is very important in the classroom for our English learners. These are our WIDA standards. You'll see that there's really just 5 standards. The first one is really around social and instructional language. So there's 3 tiers of vocabulary. Tier 1 is really that social language that students pick up very quickly. These are things I say when you get off that airplane in Spain or France, that we develop our tier 1 language quickly too. It's things like bathroom, food, teacher, homework, okay, if we're thinking about a school language. So it's all that social language, lunch, everything that kids pick up very quickly, so that you see them quickly chattering with their friends out at recess. They develop their social language very quickly. There's not really a lot that we have to do other than giving them opportunities for to talk and develop their language that we need to do in regards to social language, tier 1 vocabulary. However, tier 2 vocabulary is the instructional language. I always say this is the I-step language that everybody encounters. It's the things like compare and contrast. Right now, cite, C-I-T-E, evidence. For our English learners, as I mentioned, it was table. So, and if every time I would tell them to create a table, they were creating a table with 4. They were drawing a table with 4 legs instead of creating a chart. And so we started having to use that word interchangeably for our kids. So then we think about language of language arts. What is that language in the language arts classroom or within that subject area when you're teaching that piece within your elementary class? It's things like character and setting and plot and author's voice. It's all the things we talk about within language and literature. It's even those text, when we think about text features, that can really go across all instructional content areas. How do we read literature? What is that like for us? And then we go into math, and how do we read and think and speak like a mathematician? What is the important language in math? Quadratic equations. We aren't going to hear that anyplace else except the math classroom. We have got to be purposeful. But we also have to look for the little words that will trick our kids up, like table. Another one that I read in a book from an English learner was that the question was, how many times will 4 go into 8? He said he wrote the number 4. Next to it, he wrote the number 8. Figured out that 4 could go in the top circle of the 8, figured out 4 could go in the bottom circle of the 8, so it must go in there 2 times. That worked for that one, but it's sure not going to work for how many times does 3 go into 12. When we say go into, what does that mean in the math classroom? When we say carry the 1, when they're adding, What does that mean? Okay? Does that mean we're going to pick something up and carry it off? No, we have to be specific and identify that tricky language for our kids and make sure that we're being specific about it and purposeful in our instruction for them. The language of science, things like hypothesize, beakers, scientists, language of social studies, constitution, declaration, things like that. So this is the language. So if you're a social studies teacher, you are not only teaching the important vocabularies, but it's really thinking about how do I help them read like a social studies a historian, speak like a historian, write like a historian. How do I teach them to think like a scientist, write like a scientist, speak like a scientist, talk like a mathematician? What is the language that these folks are using that we should be using in our classrooms as well? Tier 3 language is also very specific. That is that content language for every content area, as well as language for specific topics or units that you're doing. The Civil War, weather patterns, rock formations, volcanoes, biomes, whatever it might be that you're studying, colonies, whatever it is, all the language that's very specific to that unit that you're teaching. So Tier 1, social language. Tier 2 is the instructional assessment kinds of language. And Tier 3 is language very specific to your content, math classroom, social studies, science, or something very specific, language and vocabulary specific to a topic or a unit that you're studying. These are some academic language resources. They're all very good. The first one just says, how do I go through and look at my text and know which vocabulary I should be pulling out from English learners? This is a great article by Larry Ferlarzo. Larry is just an outstanding individual to follow. Everything he writes is amazing. He has a great blog that you might want to follow, and he gives out the best resources for digital resources. So he's a great resource for you. And then some instructional strategies for academic language, and we'll talk about those in a moment. But these are some additional ones with some great ideas. This is also a list of how do I focus on what should our instructional language look like, and is there some core vocabulary that we should really focus on. And if you really go in here to Jim Burke's website, you can find his A list. What Jim did is he went through and looked at the SATs, the ACTs, and every single state assessment and pulled out all of the vocabulary that used and looked at what was used most. And it's words like evidence, compare, contrast, analyze, describe. So it's a great list when you're trying to say, okay, school-wide, we want everybody to be able to understand these 15 terms. And remember, it's so much more than just giving them a vocabulary list and having them define it. It's really, kids should be able to read it and write it and use it in academic conversations. I mean, they should be able to know what that word and apply it in lots of situations, inside out, upside down, have a good understanding of that vocabulary. And then there's just a few more extra ones for you at the bottom, resources. So when we're really thinking about our piece with our for every lesson, when we think about it, most of us focus right here in the middle, and that's the content. So we have our learning objectives. Today we will learn about, and if we do what research tells us is best practice, we also follow that up with success criteria. So we tell the kids, today you will learn about this, this, and this. When you leave today, at the end of this lesson, at the end of this unit, by the end of this week, you should be able to do these skills: identify main idea, follow an algorithm, whatever it might be, solve these problems, and you should know this content, which is often your vocabulary. It might be some processes or things that they need to know. And so we start with our lessons with what's that content, what's our state standards, what's the topic we're focused on, what's the content we're going to teach. However, with our WIDA standards and with our English learners, when we also need to think about two other things, and that's the language. What is that academic vocabulary that's going to be needed? What's that language that's going to be needed for them to be very successful with this lesson or unit? And then last, what kind of instructional supports do I as a teacher need to put in place to help our English learners be able to learn this content at a high level and develop their language at the same time. So if we see this, in this case, the language function was follow oral directions, and they are and their content is that they're working on designing maps, area maps. And this instructional support is she's going to give them all kinds of visuals, lots of samples and examples and manipulatives, so they could really work with maps first and see what they're all about, and then they'll design their own maps. So this is a classroom teacher that's going to talk to you just a little bit about what she does in the classroom. I do notice that the volume for her has not been going very loud, so you may want to stop and fast forward through her video and watch it at a time, or just click out of it and watch it on YouTube.
Hi, this is Betsy from Classroom Teacher Resources, and today I'm going to talk to you about how I work with my English language learners. So I'm in my classroom today, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about how I work with the English language learners in my classroom. This year I have a level 1 ELL in my classroom. She just moved from Moldova and didn't know any English, but she's reading at a second grade level now, and she's been in school for 4 months. So we've made huge growth in that area. So some of the things I do, well, every week I give my student sticky notes with words on them, and she has to go find those things in the classroom. An example is pencil sharpener. She had to figure out, what did these giant words mean? It can be pretty intimidating, but if she hears it said, she understands a little better. It's just connecting the sounds to the words. Here she labeled a poster. And then this was a funny one. She had to figure out what exit means, and on the other side of the door she had to label enter. Those were new ideas for her. She knew it was a door, but she didn't understand the terms exit and enter. So we're really growing her vocabulary. Some of the other things I do is anytime I'm posting vocabulary words in the classroom, like on my science bulletin board, I'm including a picture to go with it so she can understand the concept of the vocabulary word. So we have wire, electricity, light bulb, those kinds of things. Other things that I do is I got a dictionary for an English to Russian dictionary, because my student actually, she speaks several languages. One of them is Russian. So I have a Russian to English dictionary where she can look up words. I also have available a picture dictionary for her for common things around the home and school. If she doesn't understand what the word is, it has a picture to go with it. And she keeps those real handy right under her desk. Another thing I did is I partnered her with one of the students in my classroom who talks non-stop. The more she hears English being spoken, the more she's going to pick up on it. She's kind of at that stage right now where she understands, and she can show me in a little bit of writing that she understands what I'm saying, but she isn't quite brave enough to start speaking a lot in English. She's getting there, and that's one of the harder things for her to do, but we'll get there. I also use I have iPads in the classroom, and I also have laptops in the classroom, so I have found books that she can listen to. The great thing about iPads is it also highlights the word as it's being read aloud. And I use Storia, the Storia app from scholastic.com. So she puts on headphones and listens to the stories being read in English, which again, she's just building that auditory vocabulary, which is fantastic. Another thing I do is every week we have a list of 20 spelling words we need to get through, and that can be pretty intimidating for a student who's just new to learning English. So I use my smartboard for our Monday spelling lesson, where I introduce the rule, and then every spelling word has a picture or a photo attached to it that explains what that word is. and then we can sort the words by the rule of the week. That's really helped develop her vocabulary as well. And you know, all of these strategies are great not just for students who are learning English, but for students who have limited vocabularies. And we need to build those vocabularies so that they have a better reading comprehension and writing ability. So it's great for all students in the classroom. If you have other ideas on how you help ELL students in your classroom, I'd love to hear about them. Just contact me on Classroom Teacher Resources, or you can find me on Facebook.
Okay, so she gives you lots of great ideas for how you might use some instructional supports. We'll talk about some more. These are some resources I gave you already for the academic language. Here are some with the instructional supports in the classroom, which are both of these I would highly encourage you. One of the great things that you can do for English learners is to provide sentence frames for them. So a sentence frame could be as simple as something such as this. These are math sentence frames, but it could be, if you're asking about what would go together, it could be, I would classify blank and blank together because it seems to me that blank should be this way. If you're looking at summarizing, first blank, next blank. See, what you're doing is you're just structuring the language for them, and then they are really building the content, and you're really not giving them the learning and letting them off easy, but just structuring language in the way that it needs to be structured. So sentence frames are just absolutely excellent for your English learners as an instructional tool for you as a teacher. And you can really Google sentence frames for English learners for every subject area and find lots and lots of examples. You can even go to Google Images and find lots of examples. There's another one with some sentence frames here. The other thing is that you heard her saying, using visuals wherever is possible. When you have a word wall, if you can have a picture, Google Images is just fabulous for our English learners. If you even have a word bank at the bottom of an assignment that they are using, you can even put next to those words in the word bank, you can put pictures next to it. If you have word walls, having pictures up there next to your vocabularies, having them identify words around the room, giving them sticky notes as they come in that have words that they identify, but making everything as visual as possible for them so they can see visually and connect that with the language. And then last, there's a couple more. Here's a new one about sentence frames. This is a really good one. And then creating a print-rich classroom at the very bottom is just awesome. And it's really about how do you really create this kind of a literacy, language-rich environment in your classroom, no matter what your content area is. All very good resources. I encourage you to check them out. And that takes us to the end of this webinar. I hope that you were able to take something away from today. The things you really need to think about is how do you build language in your classroom? So what kind of vocabulary do you need to focus on? But remember, it's not just the difficult terms. It's also that little language that comes in, like things like carry or borrow, or how many times does something go into, or if you say what, 3/4 of 12, what does that mean? We hear a lot of little language like that our English learners struggle with. We need to think about having visuals as much as possible in the classroom, attaching visuals to words, to definitions, having them identify things around the classroom with sticky notes, and using sentence frames and word banks for our English learners to help them frame language and to be able to pull on vocabulary is also very, very useful. Last but not least, you could also use gestures. So if you're talking about going to one corner of the room, you physically point to that corner of the room. If you're talking about get out a sheet of paper, you grab a sheet of paper and show it to them. If you want them to create a chart, you might even outline with your hands like a square. So these are all things that we can do to help our English learners in the classroom. If you're looking for more instructional strategies or ideas for using the can-do statements through WIDA and planning and assessing for English learners, I would encourage you to watch the longer version of the WIDA 101. Thanks so much and have a great day.